In this video, I'll be demonstrating the tool housing removal and error explanation on the PAT4.0 4.0 hand tool. Prior to removing the housing on the PAT4.0 4.0 hand tool, you want to make sure you're properly grounded with an ESD ground strap, as you can see that I am. This will prevent any damage to electronic components inside the hand tool. Next, you want to just take and remove the 5 screws out of the left-hand housing. And there are 2 different length screws, so a lot of times I just leave the screws in the holes in the left-hand housing so you remember where they go. Okay, I think my screws are all loose here. I can just take and remove my left-hand housing. And by the way, this piece that just fell out is a counterbalance holder, and it actually belongs right here. So when you go to put the tool back together, that's where your counterbalance holder goes. As far as the housing removal and error explanation, as you can see, I've got the top housing removed already. And the first thing I want to talk about is the membrane switch right here. This membrane switch is responsible for activating the tool. As you can see, there's a urethane pad on the bottom of the rear jaw handle that comes in contact with the membrane switch. That's how it activates the tool. I've seen the urethane pad come detached or be missing. I've seen the membrane switch actually come unplugged from the rest of the harness. And I've actually had a membrane switch go bad before. But if you pull the trigger and the tool doesn't actuate, this is the place where I would be looking inside the tool. Now I'm going to remove the bottom housing, also known as the right-hand housing. So I'm just going to flip the tool over, and there is a screw right here, and I'm just going to remove the 1 screw here. Just take and unscrew this, drop the screw out, and then I can just take and remove the internal workings of the tool. And in order to do that, what I'm going to do is I have a nut driver, a 4mm nut driver. I'm just going to back off the screws about a turn or so. This is giving me a little bit of wiggle room on here. And then I'm going to grab my tool sensor, which is right here, grab my thumb and index finger and pull this out. And then again, what I'm going to do is grab a Q-tip with isopropyl alcohol and just go ahead and go inside here, and it's on the bottom and the top of the tool sensor housing. So I'm just cleaning inside here, and then just again put this back in like so. Make sure it's all the way pressed in, and then again tighten my board screws with my 4mm nut driver. Next, I want to cover the jaw sensor. The jaw sensor is located right here, and the jaw sensor is responsible for looking for the slot in the disc. I'm going to rotate my jaws, but here's the slot in the disc that the jaw sensor is looking for. So on a good cycle, you'll notice the front jaw is coming in. The jaw gear disc will make 1 complete revolution, come back to the home position. And as I mentioned in a previous video, the main cause of jaw sensor error could be ties stuck in the gears or the PC board being bad. But a couple other places that you can check are, it's possible that the jaw sensor itself is dirty, and you can grab a small cotton swab with isopropyl alcohol, and if you can turn the slot in the disc right, you can clean the inside of the sensor lens on both sides. The next possibility could be the jaw sensor being unplugged, and if you notice the wires here, the jaw sensor is the front plug, so you want to make sure that that's properly seated in the connector. And one other real remote possibility is if these screws came loose and the jaw sensor was pivoted outside the slot in the disc. But you could loosen the screws, pivot the sensor back down, and tighten them back up. And that would cover jaw sensor. Next, I want to cover the detent sensor. The detent sensor is located right here. It's this black plastic housing sensor right here, and it's got a D on the wiring. But the detent sensor is responsible for shutting the tool off at the end of the cycle. At the end of the cycle, this detent assembly, I'm going to put a small screwdriver right here and pivot this here. But when I pivot it, a flag comes up to break the sensor lens. So what I'm going to show you is, if you can take a look at this, I'm going to pivot it, and that's actually how it shuts the tool off at the end of the cycle. The main cause of detent sensor dirty or blocked would be the detent sensor itself is dirty, and you can use a small cotton swab and isopropyl alcohol. And again, what you can do is get inside and clean the inside of the black plastic housing sensor lens. The other thing you can check is make sure your detent sensor hasn't come unplugged from the board. Make sure it's seated properly in the connector. Lastly, there are small E-clips right here on this side of the blade pin, and there's another one on the other side of the blade pin, but I've seen them pop off before, and the blade pin comes partially out, and then when the detent assembly pivots, the blade pin gets bent. In the event that has happened, the tool needs to be repaired. That concludes the tool housing removal and error explanation of the PAT4.0 hand tool.